with the massive turnover on our basketball roster next year, who's going to lead the team in scoring? And also, is Pat Bryant ready to become wide receiver one? Locked on Illini, let's go.
You are Locked on Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday to you all. Thank you for making Locked on Illini your first listen every single day. Just a friendly reminder, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Network. If you want to help me out, costs you nothing. Just hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, or leave a comment. Helps me with the algorithm. And if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe on your favorite podcast app. If you're listening to this via podcast, find me on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button. Again, takes 2 seconds of your time, costs you nothing, but it helps me out immensely. Happy Friday. I wanted to kind of, as I tend to do on Friday, kind of keep things a little more chill, a little bit more relaxed. I was looking over our basketball team, so I was kind of curious on your guys' thoughts, and that was who's going to be the leading scorer on the Illini basketball team next year. To me, there's really two strong candidates, but we can go through almost the entire. We don't have to go through all the entire roster. Maybe we'll just go through some of the contenders. I'm going to go ahead and start with Dre Gibbs-Longhorn. I think he's one of the better scorers on our team. I think he's going to be kind of like a more of a microwave guy, kind of the role Justin Harmon played last year. Because he's not starting, I don't think he's going to be able to accumulate the amount of points that he's going to need in order to be our number one scorer. But at the same time, he's also one of the guys who he's probably the top three players that if the ball is in his hands, he'll be able to get a hoop for you. So DGL, I think at some point in the future could be our leading scorer, but I don't think 2024, 2025 is going to be it. Let's go with the other returning Illini, Ty Rodgers. Ty Rodgers, now, of course, this is under the presumption that he's a starter next year at the 3. I don't think I'm being unreasonable when I say I just kind of cross him out. I don't think he's ever going to be a pure scorer. Ty Rodgers does everything else simply very, very well so that his scoring isn't necessarily needed. He's still going to be one of our top offensive rebounders, and he will get his buckets that way. But if he scores more than 15 points a game, I would be shocked. In my opinion, when he hits double figures on the points box score, that will be a success. That's just not what we need him for. So Ty Rodgers is probably not the guy either. We have who I think is probably the best overall talent on our team, the newcomer, Kasparas Jakushonis. He obviously put on a showing, averaging almost 30 points a game in Berlin a couple of weeks ago when a lot of the attention was on him, in particular from other Illini fans who were kind of watching to scout because, the rumor was there that we were already going after him at the time. So he can score. I just don't know if he'll be able to score at the college level next year. I think he's a double-figure guy, to be honest. But I don't see him going much over 10. He's so much of a playmaker that I think ultimately, even though he will be getting better throughout the year and as the year progresses, I don't think he's going to be able to accumulate the stats of the two final guys I'm going to talk about next, who I think are going to be one of the greatest beneficiaries of KJ joining our basketball team. First off, I'll just go ahead and start with Kylan Boswell, the guy, the image that you see on this thumbnail. I think he's probably the most accomplished player on our team. He's the one who is the most established when it comes to performance at the college basketball level. He lost some playing time last year for Arizona, but it was a very good Arizona team. And let's be frank, when you're teammates with Caleb Love, sometimes it's just hard to be able to get your shots in. And Caleb Love is just one of those type of players where when you're sharing the court with him, you kind of get lost in the rhythm. And it's hard to keep your head in the game. But Kylan now, obviously, he comes home. He's working with Fletch. He's got a thick body as it is. He's got that big Samoan body. And now, after 1 month, the other day, he posted a picture of a before and after on Instagram of him working out with Fletch. And of course, he's toning down because that's what Fletch does. The college basketball's biggest cheat code. That's what Fletch is. I really think Boswell is one of those guys who, because he's going to have the ball in his hand so often, I think he's probably a candidate that could end up leading the team in scoring. He's not a great shooter, but he's a solid shooter. And the amount of pick and rolls that we're going to be running, there's a chance that the defender may not be able to withstand the big body once he starts backing him down. I don't think we're going to be playing a bunch of booty ball this year, especially with the roster talent that we've brought on board. But if there's one guy on the team to do that, it would probably be Kylan. So Kylan, in my opinion, would probably be the second best option for leading scorer, which of course leads me to who I think will be the leading scorer on next year's team. And that's Ben Hummerkaus, the power forward transfer from Evansville. Ben is 6'9". He averaged almost 15 points a game last year for the Aces, about 5 rebounds and 2 assists a game. And now, keep in mind, those numbers are solid. Probably they don't jump out at you, but he was also injured for a pretty significant portion of last year. But one thing that really jumped out at you is his three-point shooting ability. In over 5 shots a game, he shot over 41% from the three-point line. And I do think that with whatever style of offense that Brad Underwood is cooking up right now, that between Boswell and KJ, Hummerkaus is going to get a lot of wide open shots. And he's already proven at different levels throughout his college basketball career that he can nail those shots. Now, is Hummerkaus or Boswell or any of the guys I mentioned, and I didn't even mention Will Riley. Will Riley is now, I believe, in Alabama for his official visit. For those of you keeping tabs, he left Kentucky already last year. And obviously, if he comes aboard, he's a pure scorer, and he's going to be able to put the ball in the bucket. But if you listened to the show last night, you know that I still think he's not quite physically developed enough to play significant minutes on the college level. So I'm not really going to consider him. But just to circle back, there's no Terrence Shannon on this team. There's no Marcus Domask on this team, where you had 2 guys averaging, I think they both average over 18 points a game. If you're not going to get that on this team next year, but what you honestly might get is 5 or 6 guys averaging double figures. Hummerkaus, Boswell. I think Trey White could average double figures if that's where if he's going to be the starter. Vicic is supposed to be a better college basketball player than his brother, who's considered one of the top prospects in the NBA. You're going to have DGL come off the bench. And I'm sure there's a guy or two that I'm not thinking of, which you guys are going to remind me in the comments, which is completely fine. But I guess the point is, it's not easy to figure out who's going to be our top scorer next year. But that's okay. I trust Brad. I trust that staff to come up with the proper system. I don't think we're going to do booty ball nearly as much because I don't know if we have the talent for it like last year, Marcus Domask basically played it perfectly. But with Boswell and with KJ handling the ball most of the time, I think we're going to be playing a lot of pick and rolls, pick and pops. And that itself is a fun style of play as well, because I think we have the guys who can make those threes and keep our offense fun to watch. Tell me what you think. If you had to guess, maybe you guys think it is Will Riley if he ends up coming. Again, big if. Do you think it's Avicic? Am I too low on him? Well, I guess I did mention Trey White, but a lot of people like him. Kerry Booth, a lot of these guys. We have a lot of new talent on this team, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what some of these guys can do next year. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. And whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only, available to U.S. customers. The wide receivers room next year for the football team is losing a lot of production on the field. Obviously, Isaiah Williams will be going on to the NFL, as is Casey Washington. But that doesn't mean that the wide receivers room doesn't have talent. Far from it. Next year, I'd argue, is one of the most talented wide receiver rooms that we've had in a very long time. We've got young guys like Malik Elzy, Ashton Hollins, Kanari Wilshire. But what we have in young talent, we're not going to necessarily have in returning production. And on Thursday, if you listen to Brett Bielema's press conference, he did allude to the fact that, they might have an announcement of someone on the offensive side joining the team next week, but he wasn't able to announce it. Now, our hope is that it's going to be Zachary Franklin, and you guys have heard plenty about Zachary on the show before, and will continue should he decide to commit. But if he doesn't, a lot of our focus is going to be on Pat Bryant, who was our wide receiver 3 last year, and we're going to count on for wide receiver 1 numbers this year. Now, thinking about Pat Bryant, I came across a very interesting article, and I wanted to kind of talk about it, and I wanted to introduce the writer to my audience, and so that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to be bringing on Justin from Volume Pigs. Justin, thank you for joining me today.
Sure. No, thanks for having me on.
Justin, right off the bat, let the audience here know what's Volume Pigs and where can they find it, and when they find it, what are they going to read about?
Sure. Yeah. So the name, I'm sure, doesn't make sense to probably most of your audience. So I write about college football, but with a specific focus on college fantasy football. And again, probably your audience feels a little perplexed right now at the sound of that, because I'm sure most people don't even know that exists. I didn't know that existed until a few years ago. So I write about college football with a focus on college fantasy football. And a lot of what I do for my subscriber base is really looking at players who are going to be productive in the future that most people do not know about or do not see coming. And most of sort of the focus really, and if you look at college football each year, most of the productive players at the end of the year are those players who get the most touches. So really, when you're asking the question of who's going to be the top 10 receivers, top 10 rushers, what you're really asking is who are going to have the top 10 carries, who are going to have top 10 targets. Really, that's what it comes down to. And so Volume Pig, really, the term It's sort of a colloquial term within the fantasy space, and it kind of should be self-explanatory by now, just players who are going to see lots of volume. And so, so one of the players I was talking about, I guess, a few weeks ago, which is the article that you mentioned, how you discovered me, was one of the players from Illinois. And I'm fired up about it, excited to talk about him tonight. So, because he's there's a lot of signs pointing towards a big 2024 for him.
So let's kind of talk about that. And as we're talking, I just realized I combined the two names of the wide receivers on the board. So if you're watching this on YouTube, you see Pat Washington on the side over there. I obviously meant Pat Bryant. So the name of this article, which of course caught my attention, was the Big Ten's most productive wide receiver in 2024 will play for ... Illinois. So obviously that's not your prediction. But Justin, I am curious, what is it in the numbers that have you thinking that Pat Bryant could possibly have a pretty big year for us next year?
Yeah, well, it's not actually that far out of the realm of possibility. Yeah, it's not like a formal prediction on my part, but I think, when you're writing an article or going to write an article, you always want to sort of think of an interesting angle. And one sort of typical structure of that is to take a perception or take a topic where people have a perception of something that is categorically quite false and sort of explain why. And so with Illinois in particular, right, that's a team where the head coach, he's been around for a while, and he's been in a lot of positions where he's occupied a play calling position. And his offenses are fairly well defined, especially for people in my community who are sort of tracking this, right? So Brett Bielema, who's the head coach of Illinois, obviously your audience knows this. Most people think of his teams as sort of a ground and pound, first run, first outfit. And that's not entirely untrue. You've had some really productive running back come through Illinois in the past. Chase Brown, obviously, a few years ago. But really, if you look at the receiving stats, specifically last year, right, their top three receivers, all three of them saw quite a few targets, but specifically the wide receiver one, Isaiah Washington, slot receiver. Williams, there we go.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Casey Washington. Yeah, it's okay. I screwed that up earlier, so no worries.
No. And spoilers for your audience. I'm not an Illinois fan or specific, so if I mess up a name, don't get too upset. But Isaiah Washington, killed it last year, had 131 targets, right? Very productive. Very surprising, I think, for a lot of people in terms of what you would expect from that offense. But even the wide receiver 2 and wide receiver 3, Casey Washington, as you mentioned, I think he saw over 60 targets. Pat Bryant wasn't far behind, right? So the top 3 receivers on Illinois really weren't leaving the field very often. So even if they weren't, an air raid team passing it in a huge amount of volume, the top 3 players were still seeing a lot of targets because they're the only ones really on the field, right? And so when you think of the top receivers in the big, a lot of people are going to think of, Ohio State because of what they've done recently. You might think of Oregon, who's a new entrant into that conference now as well. They've got some good receivers. But really, when you look at the landscape, especially Ohio State, many people might think of, they have a new OC now, Chip Kelly. Most people know who that is. His MO is a little bit more run heavy. They have more of a run heavy QB this year. They have 2 tailbacks who are both expecting to get a lot of carries. They've got 4 wide receivers now who are basically all expecting to be starters. So it might not be as cut and dry where an Ohio State receiver ends up leading the conference in receiving. And you look elsewhere, and there aren't really a lot of other names as well that sort of stand out at you. Whereas you look at Illinois, based off what they've sort of done over the last couple seasons, specifically that staff, Bielema and his OC, Looney, they've actually featured the wide receiver position sort of a surprisingly strong amount, I would say. Especially once the OC joined, which was last year in 2022, Looney, who comes over by way of UTSA. He has a track record of basically keeping the same 3 wide receivers on the field all the time. It was the same thing at UTSA. They had 3 really productive wide receivers headlined by a guy who might be reuniting with the program. You mentioned him, Zachary Franklin. So I am rambling here a little bit. I'll pause here.
That's okay.
Yeah.
No, and you know what? I think you're exactly right. Usually when you think of Brett Bielema, you think of ground and pound, big offensive lineman, a good running back room. And we didn't have that when Brett Bielema originally arrived, but I'm actually very high on those 2 rooms this upcoming year. It's the defensive side of the football that Illinois fans are kind of more concerned about, but the staff seems to be very excited about what our offensive line is going to look like. We got a couple of transfers in particular J.C. Davis, which a lot of people are very excited about. Luke Altmaier, in my opinion, I hold him as one of in the top third of quarterbacks in the Big Ten. Some people have him a lot lower than that, but I just think that last year, at least in the first 5 or 6 games, he was running for his life because the offensive line wasn't ready. So some of his bad habits were kind of confirmed in the sense he was trying to make quick decisions, or he wasn't making, he was being insecure and he was taking too long to make the reads. I think with an off season of, just working on his game, I mean, this year is only going to be his second year starting in college football. So
Yeah.
I do expect a little development on his end, especially with the offensive coordinator like Barry Lenny Jr.
Yeah, well, and one thing you mentioned there, which again, sort of from the angle that my audience is looking at it, this is a plus, but maybe from the Illinois fan perspective, not a great thing. So the defense being bad is actually a huge plus if you're in the sort of fantasy, if you're looking at it from that perspective, right? Essentially, what we're looking for is just a high concentration of target share. So is this a staff where the wide receiver one typically averages 25% or higher target share? Since Bielema and Looney have been there at Illinois, I think that number is around 27, 28%. So that's a check that they check that box. Is the offense do they move at a fast pace or are they slow? Illinois actually last year, surprisingly, were top 25 in the FBS in terms of seconds per play run. So other teams that were in that vicinity were other, like air raid programs or sort of high flying passing attacks, which are typically faster. But Illinois, despite the fact that, you think of them as more of a run heavy team, slower team, clunkier Big Ten kind of team, they moved very fast last year. And then, the point that you mentioned earlier that I highlighted just now, the defense not being good, this is another great thing in terms of if you're, from my perspective or from my subscribers' perspective, anything that motivates the team to have to continue trying to score every single play, right? What you don't want is in the fourth quarter, them taking the foot off the pedal and stop trying to score and just running out the clock, at least, for my audience, at least. So there are a lot of factors there that are quite, positive in the sense of if you're arguing for a player like Pat Bryant to finish with a lot of stats at the end of the season, there's quite a few reasons why that could be the case.
Very interesting. Again, I'll be honest. I've been playing fantasy football on the professional side for almost 20 years now, and I knew that there was a secret underground world on the college football side. But it's nice to hear or finally find a source to kind of look into that and learn more about that more. But Justin, speaking of this, let's kind of wrap things up. If you don't mind, let the audience know one more time a little bit about Volume Pigs.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, what I'm writing about in Volume Pigs, again, you don't have to be a college fantasy football player. There's all kinds of subscribers who are not college fantasy football players. So it is mostly a college football first publication. It's just that the specific focus is a little bit more tilted towards college fantasy football topics. But basically what I do, and as you saw in this article, is I'm highlighting players and really going at a very, very deep level. And when I say deep level, I don't mean what do they do on their free time or what are they majoring in. I mean specific sort of information that would actually be useful for somebody who is, I don't know, speculating in any sort of fashion in college football, whether that's sports betting, college fantasy, or if you just want to be the smartest guy in the room at the Christmas party, whatever. But I highlight different players, talk about different topics, anything that sort of would be interesting, and really go in depth, right, with various different stats, things like that. So yeah, I mean, I started that publication last year, February. We're already over 650 subscribers, almost 100 paid subscribers. So it's been going good, and I'm sure, as you said, you'll link the article to this video. So for those who are interested, take a look at the article. If you like it, hop aboard. If not, that's fine. And yeah, it's this again. Thanks for bringing me on the show.
No problem. Thank you, Justin. And next time you have any Illinois content on it, we'll bring you back on the show if you're good with that.
Sure. No, absolutely. There will be. I do this every year, right? So next year, Pat Bryant will go to the NFL. There'll be another guy who steps up. So, and hopefully maybe there's a running back too, right? Caden Fegan, I think his name is.
That's
so
right. Yeah.
There's a lot of people in my community are pretty happy or pretty excited about him as well. So there might be another article coming up soon.
I'm looking forward to it. But for now, Justin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Have to turn down the volume with all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, it's Friday. We've reached the last segment on Friday. And if you've been following us on this journey of Locked On Illini, you know I kind of use it for just random news and notes. There's news happening throughout the week, every single day, but there's just sometimes they're not big enough to really devote an entire segment to them. So I kind of put them off to the side and figure I'll kind of bring it back up on Friday in this particular section. First one I'm going to bring up is the women's Illini team hired a new basketball assistant, Lisa Frunt. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And if I'm not, again, you guys know my history with names. I apologize. She spent the last 3 years at Tennessee. And then we also have congratulations to the football team. It was announced late on Thursday that they, as a team, averaged a 3.12 GPA. So congrats to the young gentleman on the football team. Brett Bielema on Thursday said that he's giving the title of general manager to Pat Embleton. Pat is the guy who heads recruiting and personnel. The general manager title is something you're seeing a lot more in the college football world today. The Team USA under-18s had a fantastic week, going 3-0. I'd recapped the first game on a previous episode, but I didn't get a chance to go over the next two, which makes sense because, of course, Jeremiah Fears and Morez Johnson had two great games. I just didn't get a chance to recap them. In particular, in a 96-point victory over Belize, Morez Johnson had 15 points, 15 rebounds, and 3 blocks. And Jeremiah Fears had 17 points, 7 steals, and 6 assists. Again, it's they're not really playing against competition that they're competing with. They're obviously a couple levels above, but it's nice to see our boys at least show some more production on the court as opposed to the first game. Congratulations to Mike Small, the Illinois men's golf coach. He was honored as the 2024 GCAA Midwest Coach of the Year. It's the 13th time he was awarded that honor. So congratulations to Coach Small. This is going to be a very big recruiting weekend for the football team. So keep your eyes out. Follow me on IlliniCast if you get a chance. If you're watching on YouTube, it's right there. If you're listening to this on YouTube, it's spelled exactly how it sounds, ILLINICAST. That's my other long-form show where I will probably be going live should we get any commitments right off the bat. I try to be first just so we can kind of talk about who the newest players are. If you want me to go live here, again, just let me know in the chat. I'm more than open. I want to see what the community wants. I appreciate the Discord slowly growing bigger and bigger. So I'll leave a link to the Discord in the comments of this video as well. But that wraps up another week of Locked On Illini. I want to thank you all again so much for the support. We're surprising a lot of people with the numbers that we're getting, both on the YouTube side and especially on the audio side. And that's why I know I kind of repeat myself, but I genuinely mean it. It won't cost you anything. Just hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. And if you're already subscribed on YouTube, find me on Spotify, Apple, Pocket Cast, whatever it is you're listening to podcasts on, find me there and hit that subscribe button and download button there. Just because, again, we're showing people that they made the right decision in bringing you daily Illini content. And remember, if you want daily Illini content, there's nowhere else you're going to find it except for here on Locked On Illini. I hope you all enjoy your weekends. And if you join me on the weekend, if there's a commit, I'll talk to you in the comment in the live chat there. Otherwise, I will see you guys on Monday's show. Again, hopefully we'll have a new transfer announcement to make at some point. Will Riley will have wrapped up his visits. I believe he'll have been on 4 visits at that point. So sometime next week, we should find out which team he's going to play for if he's going to be reclassifying to 2024, which I've already talked about on the show. I think makes the most sense. But until then, you guys all enjoy your weekends. ILL, love you guys.